Hi, and welcome to the Mental Health Raw and Open podcast. I'm your host, Jody, and I created this show to have honest, candid conversations about mental health in an effort to help reduce the stigma. I am issuing a trigger warning as many of the topics we discuss may be highly sensitive for some. If you are having suicidal thoughts, please reach out to someone, go to your local hospital, or call a crisis line. In the United States, call 1-800-273-8255, or in Canada, 1-833-456-4566. In today's show, we'll be speaking with someone I feel like I have known for 20 years already. Her name is Sarah Schuster. She is a writer and an editor for a fantastic site called The Mighty. If you have not gone there yet, it is your place to go for mental health information and mental health stories. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jody. How are you?
I'm good, honey. How are you?
I'm good.
I feel like I've known you for so long.
I know. And this is what happens, right? It's like when you're sharing your mental health stories with people, even if you're not even in the same country or you've never actually met in person, it does kind of feel like I know you, or even just following your Twitter feed. Yeah, it's pretty special to get to talk to you today.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about it too. I know you do a lot of work with The Mighty. I know that's something very close to you. If anyone doesn't know, The Mighty is a mental health website that everybody should go check out. It's at themighty.com. It is stories of everything and anything mental health and health related. I don't know what else to say. I love it there. I'm published there, and I think everybody should go there, so you can now take over.
Yeah. I mean, thank you. That's so kind. Yeah, I mean, really what The Mighty is an online community. And we've really evolved over the past few years to, as you said, you've been published with us, to kind of be a place where all of these first-person stories about people's different health journeys can live. So you're right, we have a huge mental health section, but we also have stories about people living with disability, chronic illness, autism, like you name it, cancer, you name it. We want to have a collection of first-person stories so that the people, seeking health information online can hopefully, feel less alone and still kind of remember their humanity even as they're struggling with their health. And now we have platforms so people who don't necessarily have the time or resources to write a blog for us, which we know everyone doesn't, can still participate in the community, can still get support. Yeah, and that's kind of what it's all about. And I was the mental health editor for, maybe like 3 years. And then literally since like January 2019, I've just taken over the contributor network in general. So now I'm just
awesome.
Yeah, it's really funny. People don't necessarily know that because I was a little quiet about it, but I don't just do mental health anymore. I actually lead this team, this like small but fantastic team of editors that we have to really try to, there's a few parts of my job. We're really trying to get the contributor network in better shape. So waiting times are down. And so people kind of, feel like their stories are going up faster, because you mentioned this before we started recording that we went from a point where I remember when if I got like 5 mental health submissions a day that I didn't have to reach out for, I was like so excited. And now we're getting, hundreds of submissions a week.
Yeah.
So it's a little harder to get, everyone's stories up in an efficient manner. But, so basically my role is to try to kind of work on creating a system where our contributors feel really heard and valued. And also we're giving back to them what they give to us and our community by sharing their words with us.
You also have that section where you can actually like communicate a little bit with other people, like put up a hashtag or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
And that is a really good kind of like idea. And I'm not sure that everyone's kind of aware of it. So you could maybe tell me a little bit more about it.
Totally. No, and I'm glad you brought that up, actually, because I do think that people, they associate us with stories first, which makes a lot of sense because that's where we began. That's kind of like the basis of, again, like this aggregate site of all these blogs and stories about health. But we also, in the platform, I think it's been about a year now, we also launched this more platform side of the Mighty that is organized into all these communities that go by hashtag. And so a really popular one we have right now is called hashtag check in with me. And basically the concept of that is if you're somebody, and this is really what the Mighty is trying to serve, if you're somebody who doesn't have a really supportive following on Twitter, or if you're someone who doesn't feel comfortable posting on Facebook because maybe you're friends with your coworkers or your family and not everyone in your life is going to, understand what you're going through, you can visit the Mighty's Check-In With Me page and basically kind of share that you need support, or share that, you need someone to check in on you, and people will respond. It's amazing how many people in our community will visit this page and will offer other support when they say it. And it goes the reverse way too, right? Then we have some community leaders who will ask questions saying like, what do you need right now? Do you need someone to check in with you? Because we know obviously it's not always easy to actually ask for help when you need it. But we're hoping that the Check In With You space and also other spaces we have, some of them are organized around conditions, some of them are organized around, I don't know. Oh, a new one we have that I really love is called Distract Me. So #DistractMe. And the idea being that if you, I know that my coworker Haley, who's our community manager, I know she's used it when she's been like waiting in a hospital or in a waiting room, right? So she's, has a scary appointment. She's waiting in a hospital waiting room, and she can, post on the mighty.com like, hey, I'm kind of like dealing with a lot of health anxiety right now. Someone distract me. And people can, just like share jokes, share YouTube videos, kind of like a more fun way for people to connect. Mm-hmm. And it's a way they can connect not just about health, but kind of just like in the spirit of like sometimes we all need people just to distract us and make us feel less alone when we're going through these tough moments.
Oh, absolutely. I was really surprised that the reach of the Mighty, like as you know, like that one article that I published went kind of crazy there. And like, I don't think a day passes where I don't get at least 1 to 2 messages. And that was over 2.5, 3 yeyears ago. And literally, I probably have 2,500 to 3,000 messages in my inbox from that letter alone, from Bangladesh, from Thailand, from Alaska, from every corner of the earth I could possibly imagine. So the reach out there is absolutely phenomenal. Never did I expect someone in Bangladesh to email me because they read something about suicide.
Yeah.
It just never even crossed my mind, right?
Yeah, and it's particularly your story. One of the reasons why I love, and I believe your story is called I Want You to Want to Live, right?
That's
and that's, just to brag about you, Jody, like that's just a beautiful letter that you wrote. It was so simple. It was so real. And it's a great example of the kind of stuff that we can talk about on the Mighty, suicide, dark thoughts, feeling like, you don't want to exist anymore. But one of my favorite things about your story, Jody, and I feel like we've told you this at one point, is that most of the people, although we do use, I'm sure you see it, we do share it on our social channels every once in a while. But a lot of people found your story through search, which to me kind of like even gives me chills, because that means that somebody was actually Googling, I want to die, or, thinking about killing myself. And your story was one of the things that they landed on, and it helped them stay around a little longer. So that's why I love your story, particularly, but also I love the kind of the potential that the Mighty has, because we have an app, we have Facebook pages, but we're really also trying to be like the centerpiece online, where when you're Googling information about your health condition,
boom, it comes up first.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. You're not just finding information, just like really cold lists of clinical symptoms. You're not
MD and shit.
The scary stuff, especially when you think of super stigmatized. I'm most familiar with mental health, so I love talking about that section, really stigmatized disorders like borderline personality disorder. You Google that, and you find, a list of symptoms, and then you find websites, and we have people have written about this before. Then the next website is maybe how to survive someone with borderline personality disorder.
Oh Quora, and I'm not slamming anybody, but Quora is the worst. Don't ever look up anything on that. You will literally jump off a building if you read what you're going to read about borderline personality disorder on there. It's horrifying.
Oh my God. And so, right. And so can you imagine you've just been diagnosed, you're like, I'm going to look for more information about my, what I've just been diagnosed with. What's this? And that's what you find.
Yeah, exactly.
We're hoping that if the Mighty is up there, we have an amazing borderline personality disorder community. We have amazing writers who get so real about what the condition seems like to them. And it doesn't vilify them. It doesn't, it's not all about the loved ones and how much it's hard. Like, it's about their experience and their journey. And also lets you know that like a lot of people like live like really well with BPD, or a lot of people, even though they struggle, they still have lives that are worth living. And they're not just hurting others, they're helping others. They have huge hearts. They feel a lot, and kind of this like different spin on things like BPD is also something that I think the Mighty can provide for people who are kind of newer to the space, but are interested in learning more about their, whatever.
I know when I was diagnosed, I literally like lost my mind when I was researching it. I was like, oh my God, it's incurable. I'm malicious. I'm evil. And the list goes on and on. And I was just like, really? Okay, can we pick another diagnosis? Anything else, please?
Yeah, anything else.
Let's roll a dice here and see what comes up,
That's hilarious. Yeah, no, exactly. So having people share their accounts, pretty powerful, a powerful way to combat that in BPD, but also in other spaces as well.
You guys did something really cool at the beginning of the year, and I believe it was called #52SmallThings.
Mm-hmm.
Which was a really awesome idea. Like, I work on that actually in therapy because I believe most people try to take on something that's a large project, then get overwhelmed and either like back off from it or become panicked. If we can break the large project into small, tangible portions, then you, A, feel accomplished, and B, it finally gets done. So those little things that were on the list, like whether they be as simple as adding more water to your day or going for a walk for 5 minutes or something, that was a really good idea, I think, because it made it into tangible things for people that they could accomplish.
Totally. Yeah, and I'm happy you brought that up. That was the brainchild of our editorial director of like our news section, Jordan. And it literally came from just what you said, this idea of, her being like someone who really, wants to improve her life, like wants to kind of make changes, but finding that every single year, and especially during like New Year's, you make all these big lofty goals for yourself and you kind of set yourself up for failure. And something I like about 52 Small Things too, and kind of any of like you could even call it wellness stuff we have, is that we try to make it as accessible as possible. So Jordan, her story is that she lives with endometriosis, and is that she, when she would read these women's magazines about like advice about sex, advice about style, advice about, whatever, like diet, they never take into consideration people who have different conditions. And so this idea of we want to make this almost like wellness challenge that you would see in other sites, but make it as accessible as possible. So people who are disabled, people who are, whatever, like live with different mental health conditions could still participate and not feel like they're just like setting themselves up for failure, as the standard we set is so high. And also it shouldn't be, right? Like, whenever you're doing a goal, there should be room for messing up and room for having bad days. Like, if you don't account for that, you just end up, giving up entirely. And I know that I've done that so many times.
So like last week happened to me, like I don't know what happened, but like on Wednesday, I just somehow knew that Thursday I was going to feel like shit and completely overwhelmed. So I canceled the 2 podcasts that I had and then woke up Thursday morning and I was okay for the morning. And all of a sudden I was just like, oh my God, like I'm so glad I canceled these because I'm like such a mess right now. It's like, I don't know if it was like a burnout warning because I had done too much or whatever the case was, but it's a good thing I canceled them. And because you're dealing with people with mental health issues, they can also cancel on me, and there's always that sense of understanding. There's no, like, you always want someone to take care of themselves first.
Yes, and oh my God, I love that so much because we don't talk about that enough, about how canceling something or how the fact that you were able to read yourself and be like, like, this is going to be a good idea. Like, how like skillful that is and how pretty like commendable that is, because a lot of people just push through. We have this I know you're up near Toronto, but I'm sure you're not immune to this very American idea of like pushing through things and working really hard. And oh my God, I am immune to that, or I'm like victim to that all the time of just feeling like I'm not doing enough. I have to keep pushing myself.
It's an awful way to live. I've done some traveling and in South America and in Europe, and this just does not exist. This rush, and hurry, and then die. because that's basically what happened. Their approach is a lot more slow. It's a little bit more enjoy life, work less. And to be honest, it's a lot less materialistic, and I like it a lot more. I went to little villages in Colombia, and people there don't know what stress is. End of story. They're poor as dirt. Okay, they're fishing for their dinner, lunch, and breakfast. If they catch it, they eat. If they don't, they don't. But they're not depressed. They're not full of anxiety. They're happy with what they have. And North America has no idea how to be happy with what we have.
Yeah, and that's so interesting too, because especially when we're thinking about mental health, what's interesting that's happening in the movement now is this idea of, and it's very important and very legit to say things like, you know, mental illnesses like are no one's fault. Some people's brains are wired differently. Some people have bipolar. Some people are prone to depression. But then also there is that environmental factor of, okay, like what about society and the pressure we put ourselves actually makes our mental health worse? More okay to have things like BPD and bipolar if there wasn't so much pressure on us to function like normal, right? I'm so interested in that kind of tension in that space between, like the important conversations about the biological, you know, components of mental illness and how, like, obviously it's like not your fault. And even if, and I think what kind of, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but I think people assume that if you tie mental health distress to environmental factors, you're almost like saying it's your fault. But I actually think that's not true at all. I actually think that it's a society that we live in, the expectations that we put on people. That's what makes it so they quote unquote can't do the things they feel like they should. And if there was more flexibility in how people were allowed to live their lives, maybe people, even people with mental illnesses, would be able to live a little happier and not be so obsessed with trying to function like everyone else. Kind of a hard line to draw, and everyone individually needs to figure out what makes them happy. So not if this kind of grind life that we're all trying to live doesn't make you happy, it doesn't matter if you have a mental illness or not, you know, like that's something that hopefully, you know, as a society we can work to change, and then more people will feel supported. And again, that was a tangent, but it made me think of what you said.
I'm currently reading a book called The Subtle Art of How Not to Give a Fuck.
Oh my God, yes. I haven't read that, but I gifted it to
It's really good. It's quite good. Like he says fuck about on 17 times every sentence. Aside from that, his basic premise is that we are living this life to reach something extraordinary, to achieve extraordinary goals. But if everybody was doing the same thing and everybody was extraordinary, there really wouldn't be such a thing as extraordinary, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying?
I understand.
So it's like kind of like a different way to look at things. Like he says, basically, you know, keep your fucks for something important. You know, like stop caring about all the little shit that we stress about every day and save it.
I give so many fucks, Jody. It's so hard. It's so hard not to, right?
Oh, yeah, it really is. What's your mental health background?
You know, I had people in my life who I'd lost to suicide. I was so young that I feel like I didn't really process what it meant. It kind of really abruptly kind of made me start thinking about mental health, OCD, and depression, and basically throughout my college years. But it's interesting because when I first started writing about mental health, I was really more interested in the sibling perspective and family dynamics. And it must have been like my junior year of college, I started experiencing suicidal thoughts myself. And that's what I won't get too much into it, but basically, you know, I have been so focused on being this kind of like perfect, okay sibling that I was really burying a lot of my anxiety and depression really through work. I've always had an issue with just kind of like workaholism, like working too much, pushing through things. And that's pretty much what I did in college. And so when I started just having like really intense, repetitive thoughts about how I wanted to die, it made me realize that like, oh, wow, something is going on. I don't know what, but ultimately it led me to, you know, start using the school's counseling center. I kind of like dipped my toe into exploring what was going on with me, you know, why I was having these thoughts, why I felt so panicky all the time. You know, I started having panic attacks. Basically everything I had buried for years basically came out out in 1 year. And how that connects to the Mighty kind of beautifully is that after kind of like going to the counseling center for maybe like a full school year and never telling any of my friends, I was writing about mental health in like my journalism classes, but I wasn't really talking to anyone about it. I finally, through the active minds at Syracuse University, I wrote this coming out blog post about using the school's counseling center and this idea of, wow, like I know a lot of people use the counseling center because there's, all these wait times and because, we know there's not enough resources, but no one really talks about it, and how I was somebody who did a lot of comedy in school, and I was somebody who, would like put on my gym clothes and pretend to go to the gym when I was going to the counseling center, and how I really wanted to just like put something out there to see how people would respond. Responded really well, and all of these people who, maybe I went to class with started messaging me just saying like, I also use the counseling center. I also have had these scary thoughts. And the Mighty ended up picking up on that blog that I wrote. And that was like my first time being a contributor. And so I almost feel like, and it's interesting too, because when I became the mental health editor at the Mighty, which was probably about a year after that happened, I feel like I really still was almost at the beginning of me dealing with the shit that I was going through. And even now, like it's still like an ongoing process. But to answer your question, just like simply, I deal with a lot of anxiety. I deal with a lot of perfectionism, social anxiety, depression. And although like more recently, I haven't dealt with repetitive passive suicidal thoughts, it's still something that I've experienced even more recently. And that's it. And that's kind of the whole thing. I laugh because I have been diagnosed with OCD by a psychiatrist who spent like 20 minutes with me.
I got all my diagnoses in 20 minutes. Don't worry,
20 minutes. And so it's one of those tricky things where I definitely think I write a lot about OCD and I talk a lot about OCD because my boyfriend has it. I always joke, I have a lot of people in my life who have OCD, but also definitely exists on this OCD spectrum of, a lot of internal compulsions, a lot of internal rule making, a lot of avoidance, which is actually can be a compulsion. So that kind of is what goes on in my brain. And it still feels like fairly recent to me. And I'm still kind of working on talking about myself and just having to be the one who's okay all the time.
It's so important, as you found out through your article, like sometimes just opening up can open up an entire world. Like if none of these people would have reached me if you guys hadn't have published me, if I hadn't have I don't even know how I found you.
Yeah.
Like I can't honestly remember. I just remember somehow finding you, and you said you take stories, so I put it in, and that was the end, kind of like one of those things you never expect to hear back from. And it just opened up an entire new world. Fabulous platform for that.
The storytelling part is so powerful. And I can honestly say, just from my personal experience, that I was writing about my mental health before I could talk about it. I couldn't say the words to people. I couldn't let myself be vulnerable. And writing and sharing things through writing was like, for me, the only way I was going to do it. And it's kind of like this funny joke where I'm the mental health editor of the Mighty, I'm very public, but my parents have found out a lot of my own mental health journey through my writing for the Mighty because I have a hard time talking about it. And so when I first started anxiety medication, which I'm still on, I wrote a piece about it. And that was like how my dad found out that I was taking my medication. And it kind of feels like a tricky way to talk about it. But for me, like it's the writing element and the being able to kind of process it in a format that's kind of like still within, like still feels a little private, even though you end up sharing it, is really important to me. And I know that it's helped me a lot. And I know that a lot of our writers, and I hope they feel like this, find that writing is really therapeutic and you do end up getting a lot of it, or getting a lot out of it, to know that you're not alone, right? Like you can write something and be like, I have no idea if this is going to anyone is actually going to relate to this. And then when you find out that they do, you also feel satisfied. Yeah.
Did you ever look into looking at mental health? Did you ever look at any genetic reasoning for suicide, for example? And the reason I'm asking is because my birth mother, I'm adopted, my birth mother killed herself on her 7th suicide attempt. My oldest half sister, who I don't really know at all, I met her once or twice, she had 3 or 4 attempts. My youngest sister, the only reason she doesn't is because she has full-blown fetal alcohol syndrome and no ability whatsoever to stress out. And then there's all my attempts. So these are 3 different people, all the environments happen to be shitty, yeah, but the number of attempts is pretty interesting considering none of us knew each other.
Yeah. So from what like I know about suicide, and I have done, I will say, like, suicide is definitely something that I've delved into more with my reporting. Like, I think it makes sense that there's a genetic aspect of it, because when you think about suicide attempts, they're always so complicated. But I do think that there are some things in people's mind that kind of make them a little more likely to not just actually feel suicidal, but then to actually, take the action and go through things like impulsivity can make someone more at risk. We know things like feeling very, like extreme emotions, right? So if you're someone who's more prone to, because your brain is wired to like feel a lot and you feel like you can't get through a certain feeling, that could make you more at risk for attempting suicide. When it comes to anxiety, I know that in my family, hell yeah, it's genetic. Like when I look at, my grandparents to my parents to me, there's 100% this pattern of our anxiety that makes a lot of sense, that like our brain is wired in a certain way to kind of make anxiety appear in a very specific way for us. But it's also interesting too, I kind of also get haunted by the genetic aspect of it, because when I think about my own life, and obviously it's not fair to compare, even though I struggled with suicidal thoughts, anxiety, depression, things like that, for some reason I was able to really function through a lot of it, right? So I finished high school, I went to college, I'm now working, however my brain is made up, even though it does cause me a lot of challenges, I'm able to function through it. And I always I think when I was thinking about my own mental health, this idea of almost like why I, get to kind of function through, and like definitely is always in the back of my mind. And I think that it comes down to this idea that like everyone is so different.
No two people are going to see the same situation the same way, ever.
Exactly. Yeah, so that's the fascinating thing. When I think about like families and think about whatever, I'm so fascinated by, even like just person to person too, like I think we put a lot of emphasis on these recovery narratives where you get better and you're okay. But I do think that for some people, like finding what happiness means to them and finding what recovery means to them is so, so important. So it's kind of like I don't know if I really answered your question, but I think the answer is yes. I think the answer is yes. I think the answer is that we are biological beings. Our brains are beautiful and different and neurodiverse. And some people are more prone to suicide attempts. Some people are more prone to having OCD. Some people are more prone to anxiety. And, there's, I don't know if there's only so much you can do, but I think that putting people, no matter what their brain is like, in environments where they can succeed, I think is so important.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
Because you lose, like I know, like personally, like my story, so it's online. This is no shock to anybody. But my first attempt, I was 8, and I've been passively and actively suicidal since then. So that's 40 years.
Yeah, Jody.
So I've learned a lot of coping mechanisms, and I've learned where that line is that I won't cross. And I've made reasons, maybe they're not the right reasons, but sometimes you have to hold on to like any reason that you can, whether it be you don't want to hurt somebody else, which is like a big thing for me. Like I have no interest in anyone being sad if I die. I just don't want to feel like shit all the time.
Yeah.
Right. So there's that whole component to it. And I think that the more that it's spoken about in families, in schools, in papers, everything, it's going to be easier for people like me to come out online and say, you know what, I'm having a really shitty day and I feel like this, without having to worry about the cops coming or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other conversation. But yes, giving people safe spaces to talk about their distress, to talk about what they're going through, to talk about, what's happening in their brains, and knowing that that space will continue to be safe is so important. And yeah, that's the fact that you said that, I mean, is true. Like, you're someone who's very vocal about feeling actively suicidal. And I'm sure you've had to make clear to the people in your life, like like this, like, I don't want to be hospitalized, please don't call the cops, but I also need a space to vent. Like, how do you kind of like, I'm curious to know, like, how do you, like, have you had to just tell people straight up so you can be as expressive as you need to be?
It depends, I guess. Okay, so like my roommate's a dude, so we know how dudes are. They're pretty like just basic simple. He doesn't really get it, but his brother had a suicide. His brother jumped off a building 30 floors when he was 14. So it's not really something that I talk to him much about. So he'll know I'm in a mood, but he's just like there with me, which sometimes is helpful. It's also very helpful for everyone who's ever been in a suicidal mood to know that your actual crisis point really lasts between 10 and 20 minutes.
Yes.
And all you need to do is distract yourself for that crisis period of time. Now, if that means getting on the phone, I personally am not a big fan of helplines, although I am being certified for children's helpline up here. That's a different story. But when the adults, I find it so scripted, which is why I wrote my letter the way I did, because I don't think that people want to hear exactly what is scripted for them to say. They want people to say, I understand, I feel the same things, I have compassion, I have empathy, your feelings are validated. And you don't really get that often from a crisis line. Unfortunately, they're good in many ways, depending on your needs. I stay off of them. I've had the police called on me twice for posts I put on Twitter. So now I have to be a little more careful on how I word things to make sure they know that I'm just venting. There's nothing actively suicidal about me, because if I am, to be quite honest, completely actively suicidal, I'm not going to be on Twitter.
No,
you know what I'm saying? When you're at that point, you don't reach out. When you're still reaching out, you still have hope, even if it's just an iota.
That's a great point. You need support, not the cops.
Yeah, and you absolutely, like, I mean, the cops will come and they were nice enough guys, but they don't know what to do. Like, honest to God, I spent 4 hours in the hospital one time and 5 hours the next. The one cop, I ended up talking to him and teaching him all about PTSD, because he had been to a really bad accident where a 2-year-old was involved and died. And we obviously we legalized pot here, so he said for the first time ever he smoked a joint with his wife, and all of a sudden he just started bawling and he couldn't figure out what he was crying about. He couldn't stop thinking about that kid. And I was like, dude, you're gonna get PTSD. You seriously need to go talk to somebody now before it gets worse. The nightmares and everything else that's coming, because it's coming.
So ironic though. Like,
it's so ironic, right?
Talk about how you posted something on Twitter. The cops came to your house and you end up giving the guy advice.
I know. It's so ironic. Like the whole car ride home, he's like, oh, I was like, I'll just Uber home. He's like, no, let me drive you. It's okay. I appreciate it so much. And thanks for your help and everything. I was just like, okay, this whole situation is backwards.
So
Somebody
weird.
talking to you in police college about this shit.
Oh my God. But I could talk about this all day about suicide and the police and how, like,
oh my God, it's insane. And even the hospitals are brutal. Like, the cops have to stay at the hospital, so you take 2 cops, pull them off the street times, I don't know, 10 people in the hospital at once. So that's, like $2,000 worth of officers sitting around talking about the Raptors.
Yeah, even going back to the crisis line, like, isn't it ridiculous that, we understand that mental health is so individual. We understand that, like, people need to find things that work for them. But when it comes to preventing suicide, there's like one thing that we do for people, and there isn't a variety of ways to help people who are suicidal depending on what they need at that moment. You either don't get immediate support, or the cops are called and you're put in the hospital. There's nothing nuanced about it. It's like we treat every suicidal crisis the same way because we're scared. I think about this a lot. A lot of it is based on, it's all fear-based. It's all fear-based, and fear-based is not smart policy when it comes to saving lives.
No, absolutely. And it's ironic for me because I don't fear death. I fear the process of getting there in some ways, but I fear the hospital more than I fear death. So walked in a room for 5 hours. Literally, if I wasn't in a mood before, I was ready to kill everybody just to get out of the room. And the fear takes over your suicidal thoughts. So immediately I'm composed because I know what I have to say to get out. And that becomes the absolute emergency for me, is saying what I need to say to get out the door. If I go home and I still feel suicidal, that's my own issue. But I will not act or say like anything in the hospital that will get me kept there. Yeah. Especially here, like there was a lady, I was in the hospital not too long ago, and there was a lady in the hallway for 4 days waiting for a bed. There's 6 beds, not 6 rooms, 6 beds in the hospital near me. When I was in there was 34 people. There were people everywhere.
Yeah, no, it's so messed up, and again, like something that we need to talk about more, because I think mental health advocates are afraid to talk about it, right? Like we don't want to talk about it because we don't want people to be discouraged from getting help, right? Like we don't want people to be more afraid of the hospital, right? But that's the reality, and until it changes, more people are going to not use, the services available because they don't work and they're not good. And why would you take someone who's suicidal and like
Throw
strip
them in handcuffs and throw them in the back of the car.
Exactly, it's like that's how, yeah, you nailed it. How is that what a person needs?
It makes you go from feeling like a mental health person to a criminal. All of a sudden, like, what the hell did I do wrong? Like, I even argued with the guy. I said, I'm not putting handcuffs on. I have done nothing illegal. He said, oh, when you get in the back of the cop car, you have to. I said, no, actually, you don't, because the last guy took me in without them. Well, you better promise me you're not going to do anything. I'm like, dude, what do you think this is? First of all, you showed up at my house 4 hours after I posted. Okay, so if I really was going to be dead, it would have been 4 hours ago. And I told them, what's going to happen is we're going to go to the hospital and we're going to sit there for 4 to 5 hours. You're going to do nothing. I'm going to be in a little room. 2 people are going to come see me, and then I'm going to go home. And that's exactly what happened.
Oh my God, Jody, what a mess.
It's so ironically stupid. The whole system, someone needs to like step outside and talk to the people who are in the system. Don't talk to board of directors. Talk to people who are suicidal, who have been suicidal. It's the only way you're going to get proper information.
Yes. Oh my God. Yep. What a sad standard of care that would not fly with anything else. There's no other, like, can you imagine? There's just, we have all this chatter about how like mental health is health, and like, like it should be treated just as importantly as physical health. But then the way we intervene when someone's at a crisis point with their mental health is not treated like they're actually in need of health help.
No, absolutely not. And the funny thing is, like with BPD, for example, while you're being tormented and tortured growing up, your brain doesn't form properly, and the connections, the neurons the pathways don't form correctly, so you end up seeing everything in an askewed manner. So everything is through like a dark colored glasses, so to speak. Now, with neuroplasticity, we've learned that we can rewire our brain and actually physically change what it looks like. But there's no way in God's name, especially in a country that, quote, pays for its health care for you, that you're ever going to get any help or tests or anything. It's like saying to a cancer person, I think you have cancer, but we're not going to put you in an MRI or CT scan to confirm. We're just going to start you on chemo. And that would like never happen. It just would never happen. They keep people in for 3 days sometimes and then send them home. That's it. What is 3 days? And then like my next psychiatrist appointment, dude, is August 29th.
Oh my God, Jody.
That's so long. So I usually drink 4 times a year.
I'm laughing because I want to be like, Jody, like make it to August. Oh my God.
It's crazy. I'm writing an article on it right now just because I just think people need to know the truth. And I'm not, again, trying to dismiss anyone from going to the hospital. If you're in crisis, go get help. But I'm also opening up the option that, you know what, you do not need to be a trained anything to help someone who's suicidal. Everyone thinks they need to be this because they're going to say the wrong thing. They're going to encourage it. Let me tell you, if your mind is suicidal and you're set, nobody's words are going to change your mind. End of story. If your mind is thinking about it, someone can talk you through or just listen to you and validate your feelings for 10 to 20 minutes. And it doesn't take a certificate and it doesn't take 10 years of university to be able to do so. And the more people that understand that they just need to listen, I think it'll be a lot better for people to not be so afraid to speak.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think making it okay to talk about suicide without fear when you're in that point will hopefully reduce the amount of people who then reach the point where they can't be, they can't be convinced otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Right? So why are we like essentially locking up people who we've already failed instead of not failing them in the first place?
Oh, exactly. With my past, again, like in foster care, I was in 5 foster homes before 18 months, and 4 of them I was removed from for either sexual abuse, physical abuse, or neglect. No, so that's being like under 18 months. So then my first suicide at 8, they didn't believe it was a suicide attempt because it's the 70s and they don't think about suicide back then. So they chalk it up to childhood misadventure. I was just a dumb kid who took some pills, end of story. Don't do it again. And it was never, ever spoken about again, ever, by anybody, by my mom, my parents, nothing.
Yep. And yeah, and you think of your your situation and what you experienced, it makes sense that you were pursuing those options based on what you went through, like it's more misguided and naive to assume that it wasn't something intentional or that you weren't in distress that you've been through, like they should be thinking about that already. Like, oh, this kid who's been through so much, how are we supporting her so she doesn't get to that point at all, versus just kind of letting it get to that point and then not even acknowledging it when it actually happened.
It's just there's no preventative anything anywhere. We just like to deal, afterwards, that happened or this happened or that happened. Well, it's happened 4,000 billion times. Why hasn't somebody recognized to stop it from happening? Not worry about fixing it after it's happened.
I love talking about this. It's funny. It's always joke. Like, I love talking about suicide.
Okay, we're going to have a whole other, I'm going to have you back on and we'll have a whole nother session on it for sure. Because
I love talking about suicide.
It's a hot topic now, and I think it needs to be as comfortable as the sex topic at your dinner table. If you're talking to your kids about sex, you should be talking to them about suicide, drugs, and everything else that's real that they will face in the world.
100%. Yeah. Although I'm laughing, I don't know how many people are talking about sex even right now.
Right? Yeah, I know. They're like, oh my God. Even that's North America is so bloody uptight, though, I swear to God.
Well, it's the same thing too, right? It's like, we don't want to talk about sex, but it's like everywhere in our culture. We don't want to talk about suicide, but it happens and it's everywhere. And, why not take control of the conversation before people are exposed to it anyway in ways that can be really damaging and upsetting?
I got a message the other day from an 11-year-old girl. 11 years old. It's so traumatic for me sometimes that I want to find out where she is, fly over, beat her parents and steal her back home and raise her fine. You know what I'm saying? And it's getting younger and younger, and that's what's frightening me. 10 years ago, you didn't hear about 12-year-olds killing themselves.
How do you take care of yourself with all these people reaching out to you?
Most days I'm okay. I have this weird switch, so I could be literally ready to jump off a building, and if someone else needs me, I'm my flip switch. That's it. My problems are gone for a while because I need to be able to help somebody else. Yeah. So usually I can do that, but I will say sometimes it gets a little overwhelming when so many people are saying, help me. And you know what? Sometimes I want to say, I can't fucking help myself sometimes. I don't know what to do. I can't make it better for you. I can just tell you what's worked for me to keep me alive. And sometimes I said it's a matter of even guilt. I don't want you per se to be sad after this conversation, or my friends to be sad. I don't want to feel shitty anymore, but in my mind, it's better for me to feel shitty than it is to hurt you. So even though that's not probably the right thing, because you're supposed to, quote, live for yourself, at that time, you hold on to whatever it is. If you have a dog and you think your dog needs fed, hold on to that fact that your dog is going to die if you die. Little things. And those little things are so essential in times of crisis.
Exactly. And that's the key, right? It's like you use whatever keeps you going, even if it's the fact that you help other people, even if it's the fact that have a pet. And then when you're not in crisis, then you start, maybe working on ways to build yourself up so that you need to rely on that less, and it doesn't have to be my dog is the only thing keeping me alive. It can be okay, I have, a wider set of coping mechanisms, but also I have to keep my dog, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, exactly. It's just little things. Some people have family. I don't particularly have family, so there's not that option. I tell people, it's really, my mom died when I was 19 of cancer, and it's really awful when your parents die when you're young. And I will almost instill a sense of guilt. Your child needs you. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. It is going to destroy them. That's the bottom line. You have to find something to hold on to for 10 minutes to get you through this crisis because your child needs you tomorrow.
Yeah, and for some people, that really helps. And at the end of the day, it goes back to people need to be inspired to find the individual tools that are gonna help them, and they need to be able to explore it without being afraid of being judged, without being afraid of being hospitalized. Yeah, Jody, man,
so true. It really is. It's a sad state in a way, because like it's so great that the Mighty's so big and everything. And at the same time, it's really a sad state that society has gotten to that point that that many people are writing in about mental health issues and lack of care and the whole 9 yards. It saddens me when I get 5 messages a day. 2 of them might be thank you very much, you saved my life, but 3 of them might be like I don't know what to do. And it might be a 14-year-old who just broke up with their boyfriend. And you know what? At that time, that is the end of the world for them.
It is.
And you need to understand that and deal with them as you would deal with yourself or want to be dealt with when you were 14. And I think that's the one thing I have, is that ability to kind of speak to people at different age levels.
Yep. And I mean, and that's what it's about, right? It's about, we need to share. People need more support, and it can't be all on the backs of the individuals who are also struggling. Like structurally, we need more ways for people to access support. And so the Mighty, hopefully, especially as we grow, and, we talk a lot about how the Mighty could have a bigger presence in real life too, right? So not just online, but...
You have to talk to Mike and get a Mighty podcast.
We do have to get a Mighty podcast so badly. We talked about the
podcast would be awesome.
Yeah, there was a Mighty podcast, like, oh my God, like a few years ago that me and someone from our product team did, this guy named Daniel, but I've been thinking about that a lot. And yeah, like more real conversations. And
yeah, dude, I'll team up with you guys anytime on anything.
Yeah, cool. That's so good to know.
That would be so fun. Just because, like, I mean, you guys have such a wide range of people and such a huge number. The thought of being able to get that out to people, to that many more people, is fantastic.
Yeah, no, I think also too, like, some people really like reading stories. For some people, it might be easier to listen to a story. For some people, watching a story can be better. And like even you talking about figuring out podcasting, there's all these different, like, some people are strong writers. Some people would rather make a video. Some people would rather make art, so trying to kind of widen the range of how people can express themselves. Writing stories the way we do is definitely like the heart and soul of like what the Mighty is. But at the same time, like there's so many different ways that people prefer to express themselves, and hopefully there'll be more ways for people to do it that aren't just writing. So, people who, again, don't have time or maybe don't express themselves through writing can still feel like they're benefiting from, learning and expressing themselves to people who really get it.
Absolutely. Quick question. Is your background in journalism?
Yeah.
Okay, so I would like to edit. I would like to learn to edit, but it seems like a very long and difficult process.
Yeah. So I
a whole bunch of schooling. I get it now.
I did study journalism. I've been maybe comfortable identifying myself as a writer really since, I was in high school. And I will tell you, I learned a lot on the job. When it comes down to editing the specific stories that we edit, I really learned a lot just from doing it. And now in my head, I have this, set of best practices, or the set of, like different editorial guidelines we have. So as we have, certain ways we talk about suicide, certain ways we talk about, even like little rules for how people can talk about their kids if they're like a parent of a child with like a terminal illness or whatever it is. We try to make our content, when we're editing, it's not just copy editing, it's also make our content as like helpful and safe as possible. And it's been really interesting to learn, especially in the mental health space, how to strike the balance between letting people speak in really real, raw ways and not like editing their words, but also making sure that the piece itself is, like something that anyone, no matter where they are in their mental health journey, can consume. Something that I do that's like very Mighty specific, not just about like writing or journalism, is I pretty much try to assume that someone who's actively suicidal is like reading every piece that we write. If there's like one comment or one detail that I feel like would hurt someone who's currently suicidal, we take it out. Because I don't want our pieces to only be accessible to people who are like doing okay. I want them to be accessible to people who are currently struggling. So it's funny because my background's in writing, my background's in journalism. I really love writing, and I do miss when I got to do more, news writing and more feature writing for the Mighty. But editing for the Mighty is so specific, and I've definitely learned a lot on the job.
I like talking to you. It was so cool. I feel like I've known you for 20 years.
Yeah, Jody,
although you're probably only 20 years old, so that doesn't work for a while.
I'm about 20 years old. No, just joking.
I'm forever 30, so don't worry about it.
Perfect. I'm 20 and you're 30.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, Jody, I really enjoyed it.
I totally appreciate it. And I really will honestly send you a calendar in a couple of weeks. It's going to take me a little while to get this posted, but as soon as it's up, I'll send you the link and you're free to send it out to whomever you want. And I will send you another calendar and we can chit chat another time. Specifically, we'll just trigger warning everybody. It'll be a suicidal chat for an hour.
Yes, I'm so excited for it. Let's do it.
That would be really cool.
Have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, you too. Say hi to everyone for me.
I will.
Okay, take care. Talk to you soon. Bye.